Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is Naga and Aseem. Today we are going to design Twitter, and it's like a mock interview. So if any of you guys are interested, like in joining for future mock interviews, and with your system design question of choice, you can contact one of us. And today, like I'm acting as interviewer, and Aseem is acting as interviewee. And yeah, with that, like let's get into designing. Okay, Aseem, so you have anything to say before we start?
I think we're good. We can get started.
Okay. So yeah, let's start with the question like design Twitter.
So when you say design Twitter, it's like the regular Twitter app where people post some messages and people can see that. Is it the regular Twitter one?
Yes. The requirements primarily, which I'm looking, is basically users should be able to post tweets.
Post tweets. So tweets is like text, video, images.
Yeah, it can contain text up to like 140 characters, and it can also contain photo or video.
Okay. Okay. And so is it something like people can follow other users?
Yes. You can follow other users, and I should also, when I log in, I should see the timeline of
feed.
Of the recent feeds from the users that I follow.
Okay, feed. So are you also...
So it's like you can call it a timeline, like how the Twitter calls it. So it basically contains whatever the users that you're following and whatever the tweets they have posted. So pick recent ones and some number, like you can pick number depending on the device where they view, how many tweets you want to pull.
Okay. Okay. And are you looking something like a search or search, because people can even search on...
Yeah. For now, like let's focus on those three features, and like if we get time, then we can focus on other extra features.
Okay.
So
this would be week 2, but we are not right now talking. Okay, sounds good. So I want to do some kind of other estimations to see what kind of thing we are creating.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention, like so on the non-functional requirements perspective, I want the system to be highly available. So that means like I care more about availability than consistency. So like if I don't see, like if somebody posts a tweet and I don't expect to see immediately, but like eventually if it's if you're able to see, that's okay, but like more interested in availability. So
okay, so first of all, I just want to check like who are our customers and for whom we are trying to build this app. It's like for a general audience, or are we targeting a specific audience?
so for general audience, like anyone should be able to sign up and use Twitter.
Okay, and it would be used across the globe or like any particular region or territory?
Let's assume across the globe.
Okay. So just want to check our kind of estimation. Are we hitting some do we have a estimation like how many people are going to use this app or something like that?
We can assume like total users like some 500 million users,
Mm-hmm.
and
So
you can also assume like some percentage of that will be daily active users, like you can take like 200 million if you want.
okay. Okay, I can take 200 million as daily active users. So basically, total users are 500, and daily active users are kind of 200 million. So I just want to get some idea that how many. So not everybody would be like, personally, I also don't tweet a lot,
Mhm.
and uh, there could be people who can be tweeting a lot, and but most of the time I would be reading the tweets. So can I
Mhm.
assume that there would be write heavy, no, sorry, read heavy, but less on the right side?
Yes.
So can I
So
assume,
it's yeah. So the application will be more of read heavy than write heavy. Yes.
yeah, so can I assume like one tweet per day, or we can say like out of that, that the average ratio is 0.5 tweets out of this users. They're only we are getting new tweets per day, 100 million.
Yeah, I mean, like, let's assume like for each of the daily active users,
They are
you
doing
can
one.
assume some number of tweets, like either one tweet or like three or five, depending on like if you want to estimate some numbers, you can assume like the total number of daily active users. Each users on an average posts some number of tweets.
Okay,
So,
so
mm,
I'm assuming one tweet average. It
okay,
could be somebody would not be tweeting, somebody doing more tweets, but I'm going with the one tweet
okay.
uh,
So,
on the right. And also I'm trying to see come up with a number myself, but correct me if
mm,
you want to have a separate number. Like on average, 5 times somebody would be coming, or like or okay, 2 times somebody is coming and checking their Twitter.
okay, yeah, you can assume that.
And on average, I'm assuming like uh, every user is following 5 other users.
Okay. So 2 times is the read.
So two
Is it
times.
like the timeline request read, or is
So
it
two
like
times
just the
they are
read
opening
to
the
write
app,
ratio? Okay.
and out when they open, they read their timeline and they go to see all the users they
Okay.
follow.
Okay. Okay.
So for one time, basically on average, I'm going for I would be going 5 different pages what I'm trying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so thank you. So based on that, it looks like if I just want to see our storage estimates, if there are 200 million active users, if they are
Mm-hmm.
doing one tweet per day,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm assuming each tweet would be, if it is a text, 140 characters, it would be on average, uh, with all the metadata, it could be like a 500 bytes.
Okay.
So that's what I'm assuming. Every day, this much data would be ingested, and if I have to just see how much it would be on, and here we have 10. So this bytes, this is KB, MB, uh, GB. So almost like 100 GB of data we are ingesting every day. And over a month, it would become 3000 GB. And
Um,
over a year, it would be.
so I'm just counting the zeros. So million is 6, and then you have 8 in 200, and then total should be um, okay. I
This is
think since yeah, I think you're
so
good.
daily injection. So daily injection is 100 GB. I'm
100 GB.
projecting
Okay. Mm-hmm.
it would be 3000 GB or like 3 TB per month. And
Okay.
based on that, we can say like it would be like 30 TB almost a year. So that much
36, yeah,
per
36
year I have
TB per
to
year,
go.
yeah.
And so it would be, storage would be 30 TB per year for even for text. But if I'm assuming only out of the tweets, if 1/5 is so like 200 million tweets which we are getting every day. Out of that, 1/5 is videos or sorry, images. Then and every image I'm taking like is of again
40
or 100
million.
KB.
So that's you are assuming as an average size of a photo.
Yeah,
Okay.
100 KB.
Now
So
you are estimating for photos, right? Okay.
yeah, photos.
Mm-hmm.
And this would become almost like so this is also become this this is 20
Mm-hmm.
and then this would become 4 and then we again have that. So on average it would be, it is almost like we are ingesting 4 GB of images every day.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
Is it 40 or like
All because this was we have
this
some.
was already KB, yeah.
Yeah. This is already KB. So so this
MB.
MB, GB, and 4 TB of images we are ingesting every day, and even the same way, if I say like out of that, if 1/10 is videos and every video size is like 1 MB,
Mm-hmm.
then it would be like 20.
Terabytes or
It would be like, yeah, it would be again, this is already MB, then this is GB, and so yeah, 20. So basically, what I'm ingesting is 4 terabytes of images every day and 20 terabytes of video. So looks like this could be possible with the modern day storage. I can handle this much every day and scale it to per year.
Okay.
So, but I just also want to see how much is my read-write frequency. If there are 100 million users are coming every day, sorry, 200 million users active every day, and they are doing one tweet. So that means if I assume how much seconds I have in every day, they are like 86 something. But on say on making the calculation simple, I just take uh, this much of seconds.
I think it's 86,400.
So it is 86,400, but safe side, I just make it.
Can everyone else go on mute? I see somebody was unmuted. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
So I'm just making that like this. So how much it would
Per
be?
second.
It would be like if I just remove this part. So this would be like 2,000 requests per second of read.
Okay. So you are just no, it's not the request, right? 200 million is not the request. It's users, right? So,
But they're on
no,
average
but you assumed only one tweet, right? Okay.
one
Okay.
tweet,
Got
yeah.
it. Got it.
And then if we thought like 2 times they are coming, 5 times they are going to everybody's page, and they are going to read, let's say, 20 tweets. So this would become 200 into 200 million. And then again, the same calculation which we just did. So this gone, this would become 400. So something I'm doing. Yeah, so this will become almost like 400. This. Yeah, this is like
Yeah.
we are going to retrieve 400 million tweets per second. So
Okay.
so that is the scale we are trying to go. So with this, I want to jump to like a high level thing. So look, easily it looks like 2000 reads, sorry, 2000 writes we are doing, but reads are like 400 million, which we are doing.
Okay.
So I could be wrong in this calculation, but looks like we just mentioned this is a really, really
Yeah.
read heavy application.
Yeah, maybe on an average, like earlier we thought, I think it's like 1:5 or 1:10 ratio of, or like it could be one, I don't know, depending on the number of followers and number of tweets, right? Like,
Mhm.
so
Okay.
we can proceed with design, but like these numbers, maybe we can use the calculated ones later, like for people to see. So, but for now, we can proceed with the design.
Okay. Okay. So what I was thinking, how this could be at a very high level, there will, because we are targeting a lot of data, we could have a lot of application servers, and we would have this metadata and some kind of a storage for our media. So this will have all the metadata, and these would be talking to these servers, and from the client, the request will go here. So when I hit that, and the APIs which will get involved is like a post for the tweet. So it would have the text, and I would say location or user ID basically. And then if there is some media, there would be some stream. So this would handle the post part for my tweet. And then I would have another APIs for follow, unfollow. So unfollow, the same thing, like user ID 1 and user ID 2, and the user ID 1, user ID. Basically, if somebody wants to follow, unfollow, there would be two separate APIs. And then for the feed, I would have a separate API, but I need to think more in terms of what kind of things I want to bring. But yes, for feed also, there would be a separate API.
Okay. So yeah, let's get into the feed a little later.
Mm-hmm.
But could you explain like how this, I mean, like high level diagram that you have written, like
Mm-hmm.
what each of the responsibilities are at a high level?
Sure, sure, sure. Let me this thing. So basically, the application servers will handle all these APIs which I just mentioned, and the metadata, the storage, we can discuss. I can tell like what kind of metadata I'm looking for. That is
Mhm.
something you want to
So
see.
does the client directly talk to the application servers, or do you have some intermediate?
It
Um,
depends. There could be like a proxy server or a load balancer, which
mhm,
client would be hitting, and then it would be talking to the all application server. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Thank you.
okay. And okay, so now let's get into maybe can you tell me like what storage you choose like for all the text, and what does the metadata will actually contain? Do you
Sure.
want to discuss about some data? What kind
Yeah.
of data you want to store?
So I would have something like a user table with user ID. So I generally always start with like I'm kind of a old school. I always
Mhm.
start with relational
Okay.
database. It
Yes.
gives me
Yes.
better perspective, but uh, but based on the other constraint, I can switch between relational and non-relational. But relation gives me a better way to think. So user ID could have a name and some other fields about the user, what we have.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was thinking like I would have a tweet table, which would have a tweet ID
Mm-hmm.
and text, and then it would have a user ID, which user, and something like a longitude, latitude about that.
Okay.
And then I have a follow table where it would have a mapping of user ID and user ID. So basically, this would be like a many-to-many relationship. One user can follow multiple users. One user again can follow multi. So it will give me that kind of mapping between users to user.
Okay, you want to call a different attribute because both of them you're calling
Yeah.
like user ID. Okay,
Uh,
user follow ID or whatever. Yeah.
for I will say like follower
Mm-hmm.
ID, and then I can say followed ID.
No, yeah, one of them can be user ID. Okay, that should be okay. Fine.
Just coming up some names myself.
That should be
And
okay.
I'm thinking about something like a media also, because we have media,
Yes, yes.
and then it would have some ID. Then it could we have a path. So I was thinking to have a media in a separate storage. That's what I mentioned here. It could
Mm-hmm.
be something like I think these days is really popular, and I have used in the past, which is S3. So, it is super cheap,
Mm-hmm.
scalable solution, and that's what I have used in the past. So it could be
Okay.
like all my media could store there, and which tweet it belongs to, and it would have something like a tweet ID.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking on top of my mind. If you want me to explore some further direction, let me know. I can think about that.
So on the storage, you are saying like so for the media you are going to use S3.
Yeah, that is one choice I have, and which I've
So
used in the past.
okay. So and what about which database you want to use for the tweets?
So I would like to start with the
Mm-hmm.
relational database. Relation database are also really powerful, but we have mentioned that per day the tweets which were coming was like per second 200 2000 new tweets coming per second. So with this, I would end up like really high number of tweets in my database. And if you see here, mostly this is like write once and forget. This is not a transactional system.
Mm-hmm.
The user is not coming back and updating the tweet. So I think non-SQL could also fit in this use case, because I can write it once and forget about it. No updates after that. So NoSQLs are really good when you're writing once and reading more, because you can shard your data in multiple nodes,
Mm-hmm.
and then you are not even updating it. So if you're updating, you have to touch base in separate nodes and do that. But here, once you write, that's it. So I think you looking this use case and the volume which I'm getting, if I want to distribute it in a right fashion, I would pick up a NoSQL database, and then use you make best use of it sharding. And
So which specific NoSQL you have in mind, which can take like
so I was thinking about DynamoDB. I know
mm-hmm.
DynamoDB has a limitation of per record.
Mm-hmm.
I think it can only go till not coming on top of my head, but it has a limitation of per record. But this fits that requirement. My text is not going really crazy, so I
Mm-hmm.
can fit one row in as it is in my table, and
Okay.
any other media is separate. Only I'm making a locating it with the path.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Okay.
was my thought process, the things which I did in the past. Based on that, I can think this direction I can take.
So so your choice is now DynamoDB or like the SQL DB, like
My
so,
choice is DynamoDB, so I
okay,
can do
okay,
because this is
okay.
like a read once, write once, read many times. So
Mm-hmm,
looks to me, and the relations are not even that complicated. I can
mm-hmm,
easily handle in a NoSQL database.
mm-hmm. Okay, and do you want to talk about like how you like since the storage
Mhm.
of the data is like larger in terabytes, like do you want to talk about how you partition the data,
Oh
like the
yeah,
tweets?
there could be multiple ways. It could be partitioned. One thing which is coming on top of my mind is based on the user ID. So same user. So if I have let me this thing. So basically, if I have something, if let's say this is my DB and I have multiple shards, then I can have based on the user IDs. So if I have user ID from 1 to 1,000,
Mm-hmm,
then I can put some or I can put some 400 users here, 400 user data here, 400 user data here. In that way, I can split my based on the users. I can make different shards and take care of which user data is going to which shard. But it could have its own challenges.
so can you explain what challenges you will face with
So
this user
one
ID?
thing which is coming on top of my mind is if one user is writing a lot of tweets and that shard will become really heavy, then I have to again split that or move the data here and there. Or it could be one shard could not able to handle that much of data, and other shards are like under they are not even having enough data. So let's say all the celebrities are in this shard, so this
Mhm.
shard will become have lot of it will have a lot of writes and it will
Mhm.
have a lot of reads as
Okay,
compared to so this might not be evenly distributed.
so do you have any other partitioning techniques in mind
So I was thinking
which
like
can
could
solve
be
this?
tweet ID. So
Mm-hmm.
based on one set of tweets could be in one place, but the problem here is then single user data will be segregated into multiple shards.
Mm-hmm.
So it could have so I might end up creating another layer on top of this, which will do some kind of aggregation
Okay.
and provide me the aggregated data. But it looks like tweet ID, I can tweak a little bit in my own way. It could be like a timestamp based a tweet ID. So
Mm-hmm.
in that way, I can make my shards in that way. Like one shard always have the latest data, which because at any point of time when I'm pulling data, I'm not trying to pull everything out.
Mm-hmm.
If I think, and we might talk about more when we talk this feed, but in any use case, in any application, I'm not pulling everything in the first shot. It would be always like a lazy loading kind of thing. So if I do something, if I just make my tweak ID based on use some timestamp factor, then I can make use of that, and then based on these shards, I can start populating data.
Okay, so what you're trying to say is like if you just choose tweet ID for partitioning, so single user tweets will get distributed across all the partitions, and you would end up fetching the tweets across
Yeah, but
uh,
if I
uh,
put them in like timestamp order,
mm-hmm. As a
then
sort. Okay.
so at any time I can make a decision. I don't want to go to all shards. All my latest tweaks are in one shard. Just pull out of it if it meets my requirement. Basically, I can go from top to down. Okay, this shard has all the latest. Okay, after that, go
Mhm.
to this shard and this shard.
Okay, do you want to like how does it work? Like do you have like two fields, one Twitter ID and timestamp? Are you using like a composite key for
Uh, it could be like a timestamp plus some incremental because I need to do some kind of maths to see how much timestamp can hold, because in every timestamp could be again, timestamp is a stamp of time. And if I'm getting that stamp lot of tweets, then I have to also think about some kind of incremental thing.
Okay.
So in one timestamp, let's say, we thought about like in 1 second, it is coming 2,000 tweets. Then that second, I have to again make some 2,000 increments. So every tweet ID is unique. So that's what I'm trying to say.
So, what would be the challenge if you use timestamp? Like the single partition is going to get overloaded, right? How do you handle that?
Which one? Sorry.
So, if you choose timestamp, you are
Uh-huh.
saying that all the data, recent data, will be in one shot. So,
Mhm.
what if there is a peak time and like so many tweets are coming in? So, how do you handle like from shard being like overloaded?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. If there are a lot of you're telling on one shard, a lot of requests are coming. So mm, based on my experience, what I have seen, if this becomes a bottleneck,
Mm-hmm.
I can do some kind of a asynchronous processing. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have to write everything immediately. I put them in a queue and write at the speed which I want. So think in that way, like I will accumulate data, sorry, and my shard is not able to respond well, then I will write it the way. And I think we in the starting we also spoke about it should be highly available. So if consistency can take a hit for few nanoseconds or milliseconds, should be okay. And otherwise, I have to do a lot of optimizations just to make sure that the synchronous thing always work. But
Okay.
with asynchronous, I can control my cost,
Mm-hmm.
speed, and have more flexibility to do things. Like I did something similar in the past, so I thought like that could be that could work here as well.
Okay. So let's talk about the timeline. Like if like or like can you talk about like how this timeline feed works, like starting from like the whole flow. So when the user makes or logs in, like how do you fetch the timeline?
Okay, sounds good. Uh, let me.
And yeah, in that when we are discussing timeline again, I might come back to the specific usage of your tweet ID and timestamp. But
Sure.
yeah, but like let's discuss that flow, how that will work.
Okay. So so what I was so in any typical scenario, I'm a user and I'm requesting for this is application server, and I'm requesting for my timeline, and and this is my DB. So what actually I'm expecting that of when I log in, it will show me the latest tweets from my followers. So technically, it is going to it would be a join of my follow that follow table and the tweet table, correct? So it will
Mhm.
try to do a union. It will try to say, okay, these users I'm following, take all the tweets, and then use some time factor to bring like 500 things. So that is one thing. Like every time the user will call this, and then it will try to get this data, and then will show it back. But sorry, I forget to ask in the initial thing, what is our latency numbers for the feed? It's like
Um,
100 milliseconds, 1 second, 2 seconds.
yeah, as quick as possible, but like this little latency is acceptable because it involves like computing, like determining which tweets to fetch.
Mhm.
So but like you can assume like as quick as possible.
Okay.
Mhm.
So one way is this, and the factors which I thought was the follow, the followers, the followed people, and tweets based on the timestamp. And there could be other factors which I am not thinking right now, because it could be some other factors. It could be uh, the views of the tweet, the likes of the tweet. So these factors can also take into picture in my calculations. Bring which tweet on the top to bring which tweet in the bottom. So,
Okay.
but the thing is, I still see this as a bottleneck, where every time if I start trying to create this thing, and we have already seen that our read requests are like almost like 4,000 kind of 400 million, or like a very high number. So if I start doing this on fly, this could be problematic for me.
So, okay. So
what I'm thinking and proposing some kind of a caching or feed generation service, which will do some kind of asynchronous operation, and create this timeline for every user, or at least the hot users. So what I'm trying to mention here is there would be a feed generation service. What it would be doing, it would be building these tweets, this timeline, and it could do two things. It can put that in a feed service table for every user. It will keep on maintaining its timeline and asynchronously keep on updating it. So everything would be ready and handled. Or it could put like something like a cache also, and from the cache I can start reading my user's timeline.
okay, how do you update this feed generation table or database? Like, so what is the trigger point that you normally update?
It could be based on the time, like every 10 minutes. So I like we have already discussed that consistency is okay. So if user is looking little old data, that's fine. It could have multiple triggers. Could be like every 10 minutes it will run and try to build this, or it could be like when some writes happening on the database, it would also trigger this feed service to make a action and update. So there could be multiple triggers based on how much load I can able to handle. But at any point I can run it after every 10-15 minutes and refresh it. So I should not be lag behind really crazy. That's what is my interpretation from here.
So I think if you have trigger points, like whenever you post that tweet, as you are saying, and your feed generation service probably picks those events and processes.
But again, that would be crazy. I can have some other kind of logic there, where only important, based on some calculation, like hot users, celebrities feed should make a triggering point based on the usage history which I have seen in the past. So I'm just trying to avoid as much triggers, so it should not make my system really crazy in terms of processing, and I'm spending too much resources just to process. Or if it is a time critical or mission critical thing, okay, I can invest more resources and keep on making my feed up to date.
Okay. So, and how many tweets like you keep in like for each user in those database, like feed generation?
So it could be like based on the user ID, and it could. I was thinking to have 100 tweets or 500, and then whoever. So let's say this is feed generation service, and then the client, when it is talking to this guy or the other interface for this thing, then there could be other things which I can do, like client will ask, hey, give me my feed, and then couple of things will happen. one thing is I could have something like a lazy loading, like only pick 100 and then pick more and more. And then even I have to make sure that which I have seen, it should based on some timestamp. Okay, if I've seen this, next time I should make that priority low or remove from my feed service. So couple of things will happen at that point of time.
Okay. And how do you discard the entries from the timeline? Like at what point you decide you no longer need to store certain
So one thing it would
tweets?
be like we already doing on the timestamp. So if it is older, it is gone. If it is seen, it can go away. But like I mentioned, there would be all other rules, likes, dislikes, or some other like comments which can bring that guy up. So it could be mix of you have already seen it. What is the timestamp? How many people liking it? Or could be multiple things. I- I'm I'm not in expert in that domain, but these things are coming to my mind. Like I can translate and map these all things into a logic, which can do things. But I I don't know further than this that how I would be doing that.
Okay, so what other mechanisms you use like to speed up the timeline? So I know like you try to have a database like separately
Uh-huh.
um, generated timeline of tweets. So is there anything else that you want to do?
So what other thing? What I was thinking that it could be I could instead of I can bring that to the kind of a cache
Mm-hmm,
for it, I can follow something like a 80-20 rule
mm-hmm,
where not everybody is all the time. Like we already thought, like I have 500 million users, but only 200 are active. Out of 200, also I don't know who are super active. So I could see some usage pattern and bring this thing to the cache, and
mm-hmm,
then we can something. It could be like a LRU, which can which can add remove things based on the based on the need.
okay. And okay,
So that was I was
oh,
thinking, and what I was thinking, like how this could be like a pull or a push. Even server can push things, but it has its own advantages, disadvantages.
okay. So is there an optimization that you can do depending on the device that the user is using?
Oh, yes, there could be things I can do. Okay, that's actually a good point. That reminds me, I have to come back on this feed API,
Mm-hmm,
which it can also tell like how many things I want. It could be for a mobile device, only 20 feeds are okay to show. And
mm-hmm,
then we can have something like a pagination where I can tell like how many feeds I want in per page. So
mm-hmm,
that things are coming to my mind, which I can do some optimization and tell, okay, I want for if it is a mobile device, it can take one page, 20 tweets. If it is a web page browser, it could take 100 tweets per page and then followed by that.
mm-hmm. And do you want to talk about like how do you how does your client pull the tweets from the feed generation? Like so,
Sorry.
is it like are you going to use some pull mechanism or
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that is an interesting
notify?
one.
Mm-hmm,
Where I was thinking that there are different ways. These days, technologies got so much matured.
mm-hmm,
It's not like if I have to speak a few years ago,
mm-hmm,
it's always like a client asking things, give me, and server. So these days, server even itself can push things to the client. So there are technologies, even server can say, oh, I have something new. Like you might have seen on Facebook where server will throw things. So I could have something like that also, push or pull, where server will push. But like I was mentioning, it could have its own advantages, disadvantages. Where if server, so how the technology works, like there, if it is a push kind of thing,
mm-hmm,
the connection should always be active. So server should always be knowing about the client.
mm-hmm,
So so that means extra processing on the server to maintain like many connections, and if nothing is happening, it would be like an ideal connection. But if some lot of things are happening, server keep on pushing things. So it could be like a mix of things. What I was trying to say, it could be like a hybrid. Okay, for some users which are super active, they can do pull if, and others for less active users, it could be a push mechanism. But uh, but yeah, so these are like some high level thoughts which are coming to my mind. But yes, I need to refine my thoughts to see what could be the best scenario I can do here.
Okay.
So yeah, any other thing you want me to touch base?
So on coming back to this tweet, you said like you are going to use tweet ID plus timestamp as partition key, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's your okay. That was a decision. So, is there any bottlenecks? Like, what are the bottlenecks that you can think of? Like when you um, so depending on those decision, like you have chosen like tweet ID and timestamp, right? Like, or like in general, if you want to discuss about all any bottlenecks on the current design, including like what are some of the limitations of DynamoDB that you can think of?
Oh yeah. So what I was thinking here was uh, one thing which I don't know if it is a limitation or not, but if a lot of people putting the same video or image, I don't want to store multiple times. We have seen my storage was like 4 4 TB was for the images, and I think was 40 TB for the videos. I think
Mm-hmm,
that much number. So I was thinking that this could be too much on the S3 side to handle, and if people are putting duplicate, I was thinking like I can do some kind of optimization there
mm-hmm,
to avoid duplicacy. There are ways which it could be handled. I want to quickly touch base, like it could be hashing or something, but I'm not again the expert of that. So one thing is coming to my mind, like if one person, everybody is putting the same photo,
mm-hmm,
I should not be putting like 40 TB, 4 TB of photos on my side, which is the same photo. There should be some optimization on the S3 side, which I can do, like to avoid duplications.
mm-hmm,
And this is one thing coming to my mind. The other thing which I see was mentioning, it could be we were having this application servers.
mm-hmm,
So if my load increase, uh, if my load increase, how should I handle? I was thinking about doing something like, because this is a global app, I could have multiple availabilities zones or regional, and then my database and application should be regionalized. That's what I was thinking.
Okay. So, like, how does do you know like how the DynamoDB like works across the regions? Like,
So I don't have that exact like 100% exact idea, but it automatically syncs its data across regions. That's what I know. Like that comes as out of box functionality. Okay, that will increase my cost. Definitely, nothing is free, but it will able to sync the data. But again, I will take the decisions based on, okay, one availability zone is not able to handle. Do I need to split? Do I need to replicate data across zones? So that decisions will come as soon as I will do more progress. But very important thing, one other important thing came to my mind just now because we are discussing this. To
mm-hmm,
make decisions, what should I know? What should I need? That is telemetry. So this whole thing should be monitored. There are different ways to monitor things, but I could use any of them. I've used in the past, like Datadog or New Relic or Splunk to see. So there should be telemetry, dashboards, monitors, alarms. So I can take actions in the future. Okay, my database is not able to handle the load, or my latency numbers are going high. Do I need more availability zones where I should replicate data? So these are all things I think I'll come as soon as my application will go live. Some decision I can take now based on my past experience, but again, I've seen few decisions can only come when you see the exact behavior of things you're building.
Okay. So is there any single points of failure that you have not encountered or like handled, or
so single point
what
of
could be
failure,
the failure points like and
what I feel is like if the database is gone down, that could be one single point of failure. What I was thinking, but I think I did initially. We discussed like we would have something like a asynchronous processing for putting the tweets. So if that part is down, still I will not lose my data. I can still asynchronously make updates as soon as it is up. And what I was thinking, like every database would have like a mirror, so like a primary secondary thing. So if it could have so these days it's really common that there would be one read instance and write instance. So all the time I can redirect my traffic to read instance. So I can do some switches. So these things are coming to my mind when I think like database could be one single point of failure for me. Do you want me to point any other, or do you want to suggest me any other single point of failures there?
No, I think so. The feed generation also, you said like that will be scaled, right? It's not single instance.
Yeah, there would be.
So,
Yeah, the feed generation service would be again. But again, I don't feel that as a kind of single point of failure. As long as I have some feed in my database, user won't able to see the up-to-date feed, but I can still show half an hour or 1 hour back, or I can re-show the same thing if feed generation.
no. I meant like when client invokes that feed generation, like for reads. So that should be highly available point, right? Like the feed
Yes,
generation.
yes. So technically, yes, that should always be highly. So basically, I will split feed generation and this notification as separate components. So client will talk to this, feed generation will be doing this part, and then there would be this another instances which are doing kind of writes or something like that. So I will split my high level architecture into multiple components. So everything I generally what I have done in the past is everything will like a microservice having its own responsibility to do the things.
Okay, I think we are good. I think we covered most of it, what I actually wanted. So I think we can conclude interview, and let's see what others have in feedback.
Okay, we'll make the floor open for the
Audience.
spectators, audience, so they can now ask follow-up questions or share their thoughts, how it could be different, or we can do a little different.
Hey, Aseem, Naga. First of all, I think it was very well moderated and very well handled, both of you. So it was pretty neat and clear and organized. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Deep.
So questions on the chat about like Cassandra versus DynamoDB or any particular choice, because I think Naga, you were pointing to high availability and consistent requirements. So there was some.
Yeah, I think DynamoDB, like as far as I know, like versus Cassandra, even DynamoDB is highly available, which means like it is primarily a single master and multiple slaves, DynamoDB. So since I said eventual consistency is okay and only availability matters, I think DynamoDB is also good as long as since eventual consistency is guaranteed. For the strong consistency, if we wanted, I mean, like, but that was not my requirement. But Cassandra, in comparison to DynamoDB, consistency can be tuned. So and it can be more write heavy than DynamoDB. That's what I feel. But I may be wrong. But like even DynamoDB is good. But like since like Cassandra multiple nodes can accept the writes, unlike DynamoDB, I think Cassandra might outperform the writes than DynamoDB. But like otherwise, in terms of availability, I think even DynamoDB is good. But I don't know. There are again trade-offs, right? Like it's Cassandra works on forums, and DynamoDB is like a single master, like based replication. So
yeah, but overall, based on Aseem's answer, like talking about the approach he took, I think it was. So, what do you? Maybe we can start with you, Naga. How was your feedback? What's your feedback, and then have everyone chime in.
Yeah. So one, I think Aseem did good. Some small things which I noticed is like I made him focus on non-functional requirements, like generally, like if interviewer doesn't mention non-functional, I mean, like without us asking, we should not jump into high-level design. But like he did, and on the capacity estimations, like which I think most people have hard to deal with. Like I think, including me, I tend to suffer. So we should have some predetermined and easy numbers. So like I think it's hard to come up with numbers or even calculate on the fly, but like I think we should use some easy numbers to deal with. And assumptions, like to make it like more you assume normally one tweet, right? Like if you assume like 5 tweets, like out of that you can assume like one tweet can be video, or out of 10 tweets one can be video, or like out of 5 one can be photo or something like that. But it's okay. I mean, like I think the main point of doing that is like we have in mind that we should do capacity estimation, and to be able to do the actual numbers we should probably use some calculators and other stuff. But like the idea is like you are going in the right direction, and the actual numbers will definitely depend on the actual system. So I think we are good, but like I think we can get better in that area, capacity estimation. And I think you did good in data model and high level design discussing, and waiting for the interviewer to like focus you like where he wants to drill down further from the high level design. So I think even in terms of discussing the bottlenecks, I think you did good. But like obviously, I think we can do. I don't know. I think you did good, but like there is always room for improvement. I can say like for everyone.
Yeah.
So
I want to hear from the audience.
Yeah, let's see like what audience says. Like, anyone has any other feedback? But like overall, I think we did focus on most of the areas.
One of the things that I noticed, other than that, that was about when you were talking about modeling, right? Relational model or NoSQL, when you started with it. What I gathered was, as a good feedback, that you didn't directly jump on very deep dive on pros and cons. You just said that, okay, this is more natural to me. And, if we can start with that, that kinds of, keeps things a little more cleaner rather than going too deep into something right away. And that digresses the discussion otherwise. So I think it was a good way of taking it step by step.
So generally what I was doing, I was trying to have my strengths wherever I feel I know better. I was trying to go that side. For example, and I was going towards a push-pull model because I know on the back end side, I could talk more on this push-pull model on the technologies which are happening. So it's the other way, just to give a little hint that, okay, I want to talk about this, and let the interviewer decide whether he or she wants to go in that direction or not. But in this interview also, I felt like I was trying to go, like Naga mentioned, directly went into high level thing, but because that is something which I thought I was comfortable with. But we have to make a balance that, okay, what interview is looking for, and I should not go really fast myself and then and digress the interview altogether.
And on this specifically, I think on the comparing the push and pull, yeah, I think you mentioned most of the points. I think there is one keyword like where you can, as a client, you can do long polling. So when you're doing pull, it means like client is actually initiating a long polling connection to the server, which means that he has open connection. Like whenever server he has any updated content, they can pass it. Whereas like in push, like you already covered that push part. So I mean, like for the push to work, like it needs to, the server needs to have an open connection.
Yeah, my feedback about this session is the time management was really good, because within 1 hour session we pretty much covered from requirements, high level details, then follow-up questions. So I've seen in the past sessions sometimes we spend more time on the requirements, but in this session we pretty much covered in the first 10 to 15 minutes, which is really great. But good, guys.
So I feel like Naga was really good in driving me towards the requirements. So
yeah, that I wanted to say that. I mean, I wish I should have that type of interviewer in my interview who actually give you the requirement in plate. So Naga was giving that everything to you.
Yeah, I've seen like in the past I was really bad interviewer and putting Dippy in always like a hotspot. You decide what you want. I want.
That is a real scenario actually. So interviewer just asks you, okay, I want Twitter. That's it. They don't ask you anything, and then you have to drive from there.
Yeah, because some interviewers are like, you ask questions and they'll say, let's add it to the requirements. So, and I mean, like if we keeps on saying that, probably we want to prioritize few requirements, and let's say, let me focus on this requirements and come back to other requirements once we cover all this, at least like some key flows. Yeah. But some people tend to give requirements like.
Yeah, I think it's very like, individualistic. It's not like, like the way you did Aseem versus Naga. So it's definitely about, different models, how people take. So it's good to have diversity and practice both ways. Yeah.
I think Vivek has raised his hand.
Vivek, yeah, I don't know if he has something.
Yes, I raised my hand and waiting my turn. So you guys are able to hear me?
Yes.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So I had a couple of comments overall, so just wanted to cover them in like, maybe in a monologue way. So first one is, I think it was a fantastic interview, good conversation. I think it was a good interview from an audience perspective. It actually sounds like a conversation, a discussion between two senior engineers, and that's exactly what it sounded like. And it was not like I'm asking you a question and I'm kind of, holding back information and expecting the candidate or the interviewee to pick things up, and that is not how this came across. So I think, as Aseem was saying, right, Naga being a good interviewer, the point is that it should sound like a discussion, and it should sound like as if you guys are coming together to generate a good discussion and a good design out of it. So that was fantastic. I think communication style, both of you are very articulate, and when you are confused, you are confused. Like you're still making things up, you're figuring things out in your head. You are rambling a bit here and there, but that's exactly what happens in a normal discussion, right? Like, I don't know, maybe it'll be this or that. You're thinking on the fly, and that is perfectly fine. This is not like you're not trying to stage an interview here. This is like a simulation of a real interview, and this is exactly how it happens. So this is like a fantastic interview. from that perspective. More from a logistics, again, people have given comments on red markers versus blue and black markers. So please try and avoid red markers. They are terrible when it comes to whiteboard interviews. Even in person, they are terrible. Especially on like a video interview, please make sure that you have like a black marker handy and a blue marker handy. Green's horrible. Don't even go near any other colors. I think blue, black are the two colors that I would use always because they are the contrast wise, they are the best. Okay, so otherwise I think, but in your case, I was able to make out most of the text, so it was not that bad. Good part on the handwriting as such. Like I think Aseem, you did a good job of keeping it big. I think your whiteboard is reasonably small, but you've managed it well, right? So I think that's the part of it. Yeah, it's not a huge whiteboard. It's not a tiny whiteboard as well, but you've done a good job of managing it. The only feedback I have for like the two pieces of feedback is one, use a better color, so that's helpful. And the second thing would be to see if you can use capitals, like in the sense that, when you're writing, for example, the design Twitter right on the top, you've written like, uppercase and lowercase mixed, right? I would generally write everything in all capital. Like block capitals is much easier to read, and it's a little slower to write, but that's probably okay. You want to optimize for read, not for write. It's taking a dig at it. All right, so that's on the logistics front. Now, on the one part that we talked about multiple times was around estimation, right? I have a couple of pieces of advice on the estimation. So two things. Number one is please use scientific notation wherever possible, because I don't want anyone, a candidate or interviewer, to be confused about the number of zeros at any point of time, right? You know that a million has 6 zeros, a trillion has 9 zeros, but how many zeros did you write and how many zeros did you knock off is a pretty bad thing to get tripped up over. And even if you get it right, you feel bad that, no, did I get something wrong? And that's going to be hard. You can increase your confidence by writing essentially 1E6, 1E9, and that is much easier, and division's much easier. You're just like dealing with subtractions as opposed to knocking off zeros, right? So please do that. That's like a big value add, and definitely switch to scientific notation if you're comfortable with it. I know that there are people who are not comfortable with scientific notation. So yeah, and in fact, I would just say 1 capital E9 in single linear order. Even if you're typing it, I would just say 1 E capital E9, and this is essentially E9. No, no power. 9 is immediately after E. That's it. Same line. This is how your floating point numbers are printed, right? In string, right? Yeah, the 10 power 5 type is also possible, but I just generally do this 1E9, and that's much easier to deal with. Then you can strike off the 9 and then make it a 7 if you're dividing by 100, right? So much easier, faster. So that's one. Second tip that I have on estimation as such is try to brutally round up and adversely round up your numbers and round down your numbers. So essentially, if you're looking at translating from say 10 million tweets a day to number of tweets per second, you can divide it in some way. So 10 million tweets per day is what? It's 1E10, right?
Yes.
So not 10. It's million. So 1E, not 10. It's million. 1E7. It's only million, right? So it's not trillion.
Yeah, correct. 1E7.
Okay, it's only 1E7. Now, how do you divide it by number of days, number of seconds in a day? It is 86,400 seconds in a day.
Yes.
Or why don't you just divide it by, assume asymmetry in traffic and divide it by 100,000. And 100,000 is what? 1E5. Don't write that with zeros. 1E5 is 100,000.
Yeah. You will get
right?
100.
And that is essentially 100 tweets per second. That's it. And you're you're close, and you'll get there like super quick, right? So adversely round up, don't round down. Like if the number was like say 128, if you had to divide by 128,000, then you cannot divide it by 100,000 in that case, because that becomes a little weird, right? So you may want to figure out how to approximate it or how to do that. There are a few ways to do math approximations. If folks are familiar with GMAT and CAT preparations, there's like a bunch of tips that people use to figure out approximations around division. How do you divide by 7? How do you divide by 11? And things like that. There are like a few different ways of doing it. But again, my thing here is as long as you can approximate close enough, that will actually be good. So yes, but it will be harder to explain in an interview. Vedic mathematics is not that helpful because it's just tough to explain that. But I think scientific notation most people get. And it also makes you sound more confident. And this is exactly what we do in regular day jobs as well. Like the precision is irrelevant at this point of time. Dividing it exactly by 86,400 is not as useful. The other thing you can do is you can keep dividing by 24 hours in a day. So you can divide by 20 instead of 20. You can divide by something else. Now, in this particular case, right? Did we do the right thing by dividing by 100,000? Or did we do the wrong thing by dividing by 100,000? Should we have increased it or should we have reduced it?
We should have, I think
you increased only. Like, I think you made 86,400 to 100,000.
but, Vivek is
I know,
asking,
but what should we do?
reduce it or increase it? That's what I think Vivek is. If we increase it, it will lower down our number.
Yeah.
Overall, if we reduce it, it will,
So,
I think.
So I think what I said is completely incorrect in this case, right? 86,400 should be rounded down to 50,000, not rounded up, because then the transactions per second would be 200 transactions per second, which is adverse, which is what we should be looking for, not 54,
50,000, right?
4. Yeah. So this is essentially, So this will be 200 transactions per second. So I did. So you should be rounding down adversely. That is the essential point. Right?
Okay.
Because you want your system to be able to handle higher, right? And be logical with how you're doing it. But the other way of getting to the same number would have been to look for 20 hours in a day instead of 24 hours. And then you'd look for 3,000 seconds in an hour or something like that. And then you can try that as well. And that will give you different sets of numbers. And you can get through that as well in much the same way.
So we're getting per hour, 3,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3,600, but
right?
downgrade. Yeah.
Round it to that, right? And 20 hours in a day instead of 24 hours in a day, right? And things like that. And then as you're explaining it, you can also add a little bit of a gimmick to that to say that, we are accounting for asymmetry in traffic. Our traffic doesn't always peak at the same time. So I'm going to assume that my daily average is the same as whatever is an average for 20 hours instead of 10 hours even. Because I'm going to assume that the entire 1 million, 10 million tweets are happening within a short window of 10 hours instead of the entire thing or whatever. And the advantage of breaking it down in this particular fashion is, of course, which you did as well in your walkthrough, is that you can change the estimation or approximate the reasoning behind this, and you can say instead of 1 tweet, it's 5 tweets per person. And sure, you just have to, you can, where to make the change to make the whole thing work. So that part of it, I think you guys did well. The only tip here is on this is the adverse approximation, so that it's easier to calculate, and scientific notation would be the two other things to explain. So those are good. From an interviewer perspective, Naga, I had a question for you. Was around sometimes I think you let Aseem drive a lot more of the conversation. As an interviewer, I would have interrupted Aseem a lot more, because there were places especially when you jumped in with the non-functional requirement and you kind of put him back in track, right? So that that gave me the feedback that at least Aseem was doing exactly what we were expecting him to do. One of the problems with this question is that it's a very well-known question, so we know exactly where we need to go. Aseem has probably done this multiple times, so he's been going through all the right motions. So it was not very clear if you were repeating what you have known, or were you logically thinking through this question. So it's a little hard for me to assess whether Aseem is just following something that he's already known, or is he logically breaking it down, because both look the same at this point of time. So one of the things that I would do one thing I do as an interviewer when the candidate is doing a lot of the follow-up leading and things like that, right, is that I would change the question a little bit and then say, let's design this one subset of the question and whatnot. Because then what happens is that then the conversation control sort of comes back to me as an interviewer, and the candidate is now designing a new system as opposed to something that he or she is familiar with. So it's just more of an interviewer tip than actually. So this conversation was fantastic. Anyway, that's all I had. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I know the interviewer job is to make the candidate uncomfortable and they'll be satisfied.
I think it's not to make sure uncomfortable. making sure they are thinking everything.
Yes.
Yeah, because their idea is to evaluate you properly. If you are well-known and you are driving, then it is not, they cannot assess you properly.
Yeah.
And one more thing I felt is like, you are also trying to give more ideas to him. While asking the question itself, are you expecting any extra component here like that? That will easily help me. If I am a interview, I can easily think like, okay, this is what you are expecting like that. Maybe just by asking, is there, are you seeing any problem or anything? I mean, I was easily able to, from your question itself, I was able to guess like, okay, this is what I have to add next like that. Does that make sense, Naga?
Yeah, it's basically, I think sometimes interviewer indirectly hints in certain ways for you to see if you can identify and tweak that. And even then, if you even after those hints, if you are not able to put that in your design or like consider that, then that's a red flag.
Okay, because I felt like, I mean, in the regular interview, I mean, it will be hard to understand what, but you, while in your question itself, it was easy to guess like, maybe that was little bit helpful, more helpful to arrive what is expected in that.
Yeah, but generally, I think generally interviewer doesn't give a lot of hints, but like maybe one or two in the max. So just to put you in the right direction.
So, but one thing over there, on the same lines that someone is asking now. So the question initially started with design Twitter, and you immediately jumped on to saying, I need availability, I don't need consistency. Do we need to bring those, I mean, do the interviewers really bring those terms while they give a system? Because this is technical jargons that you're bringing in, immediately asking a design question. So I didn't follow that. Does that generally happen?
Yeah,
or
because
do you expect
generally
the
like
candidate to come up to a point and then decide and then get back to you whether you want availability or consistency?
I can answer that.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Aseem.
So what I've seen in the past, again, see, system design is subjective. Two individuals are again subjective. Again, it depends. Sometimes interviewers come and they give the requirements directly because they don't want to spend too much time in requirement gathering. If they spend too much time there, then we won't get time for the other parts like high level and other things. So it could be, sometimes it's really, really abstract where interviewer won't tell anything and like the conversation, the interview drive. But again, it depends on person to person how they take. Sometimes even people come with a list, hey, this is the paper, you see that, look all the requirements and then start doing that.
Oh, if those things happens, it would be more interesting or easy maybe, because my experience also a little bit different. Always they were saying, okay, what is you are expecting for this system? What do you think how your system behave? Like that they were keep pushing more than giving. Unless until I completely stuck, they were trying to push me to reach the place where they want. Like the other person say, I want availability like that and all. For this kind of system, what do you think? What is important? Like that, they will be keep pushing more, and that's how I felt. Maybe if this kind of thing happens, it will be helpful if they are giving more clear requirements kind of things. And yeah, that's something interesting to know.
See, it again depends which interview wants to focus.
So in last two interviews, I think Aseem followed that pattern, and here in this interview, Naga followed a different pattern that where interviewer actually giving you a front, so that his focus was maybe something different, and he was having something different in his mind.
That's great. I think we covered a lot of content. Like Aseem has a great point. Like if that was not the case, if that information was not fed by Naga initially, we might have been struck with those general conversations to arrive at a solution rather than discussing the entire solution like we did. Like the breadth that we covered in this interview generally won't happen across interviews. We may just go into one component like let's say feed service. The entire interview might go into feed service. It is such a complex system. Explaining it, each component of it takes 1 hour for you. So yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I agree with this.
I think in general, I mean, we only get max 30 minutes for that kind of thing. If it's a senior engineer, so most of the times behavioral, and then you will get only 30 minutes to actually discuss the system design. And here we spend almost 60 minutes to discuss that.
Yeah, so generally like max 40-45 minutes is what people spend on the system design. But like I think initially we did start little late.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we started at 9:10 and we closed at 10 o'clock. So we spent like 50 minutes. I think it's a good amount of time.
Yeah.
But still, we covered a lot. I mean, overall, you two guys covered a lot. It was giving very great picture. Like, if we are able to do this much, definitely it will be impressive in interview.
1918 வந்தது வந்து 3 வருஷம் கழிச்சு தான் சரியாச்சான். அதனால இப்போ 3 வருஷம் ஆகுன்றாங்க.
Someone needs to be muted.
1918ல
Yeah, before Vivek again comes in, Naga and Aseem, you did a great job. It was a fantastic meeting with both of them. Yeah, and it was really, really helpful for us. Yeah, thank you. Now Vivek again.
One question.
Aseem, yeah, go ahead, please.
No, if the interview is, can I ask a technical question here? Like, probably.
Go ahead.
So the point, when we store videos or image files out of this, what is expected? Like, do they chunk or do they? How is that file handled? The size will reduce and then get posted back, right? So can we go a little into that? Like, how is that taken to a blob or blob storage kind of thing?
Sure. So basically, it again is a subjective question, and interviewer, if you want to go into that depth, we could have covered that. But my general idea is, if I have to tell, like, when we would be getting that information, we first compress it and then only store into our thing. So gathering from the client side could be different ways. If it is an application on the client side, we can, the application itself can do, or I have to do somewhere on my server. Reduce the size and then store it into the data store.
So is that a chunker service? Like it chunks the files, or is that like it just compresses or reduces the file size and quality?
It will just reduce the file size. And again, there could be multiple components. For images, it could reduce. For videos, it could do a lot of things. It could even start doing encoding. For so there could be like encoding.
If you upload in one format, it will probably convert into multiple formats. Depending on the user's network bandwidth, it might pick one of those lower bandwidth ones or higher.
Okay. So one follow-up over here, like let's say a celebrity in US posted something. It's a video. And then this is accessed all over the world. The video, how is that? Is that the S3 storage also gets replicated across?
Yeah.
Yes, S3 is, S3 internally is like built on, I think, Dynamo concept. Like if you read Amazon's Dynamo paper, I mean, like most of the Amazon infrastructure is built around that concept. So it's very highly available.
And it is, you can have regionalized, you can say regionalized also. That's what my understanding.
So when we do the regionalized replication, the URLs will still stay the same and will be redirected based on where it is getting accessed from? Or is that something an application layer should take care of?
I think like probably what happens is people most likely don't access videos directly on S3 maybe, or since it's streamed, probably CDNs can help whichever in those regions. Like CDNs can pull from S3 on demand, like when somebody is viewing the videos. So the CDNs are closer to the user wherever they are, right?
So Naga, should we be copying the data between the continents? Like should I be replicating the whole US continent Twitter data to India, I mean the Asia Pacific continent, and then again do the reverse thing. I mean, how do they do it? I mean, a lot of Indian people or Asian people would not care about the US tweets at all, right?
No, it depends on basically like every it's how you choose replication and suppose like if all the users if whatever the tweets or like my followers are spread across the continents, then it's more likely that the people across the globe are going to view, right? So I think it makes sense, like suppose imagine a scenario where one entire region can go down. In that case you need some backup copy.
I'm talking about the continent. I mean, I'm treating whole US continent as one entity. I mean, there might be different regions.
Yes, I think, I mean, like to have your data guarantees, durability guarantees, even I think they will have a copy in another continent, maybe just one copy if it's not highly accessible. And you can choose depending on whether it's accessed by the users, you can have in hot storage and be ready to serve the users, or like if you just are using for backup purpose, then you can use cold storage like SSDs or some disks.
So are we saying that the Europe's tweets are also in the data centers that are located in United States?
See, what I've seen in the past is there are some things it might not be there, but if there is a request for the tweets, then they start pulling the data. That's what I have seen. For example, let's say Facebook, how they do is so they know all your friends, so they try to make clusters out of it. So let's say you are in India, but your friend is in US who's located. So they will have your friend's data also in somewhere in India side, because when you open your friend's page, it should be fast. But let's say you're opening an unknown person, you have never ever met that person and seen his or her profile for the first time. That time there will be a lag because that data itself is not there on your side. So I've seen there are different ways to solve this problem. It could not be there, but they can bring this on demand, or they know your cluster. They know how much level you like. We just mentioned that one person is following 5 people. So they'll try to make clusters out of it. Okay, this user is following this, and then that person is following next 5 users. So that data, what I've seen is they will keep in one place together. And suddenly you are pulling a new user data, it will take lag because that data won't be there in your data center. And then it will go to other data center and either pull it or bring to your data center. So even I don't have a clear-cut answer, but that is what I have seen in the past.
I think Vivek raised hand.
Not on this topic. So I think complete this topic. I wanted to digress and cover something else.
Okay.
Okay, so on this, probably I just want to add one more thing. So just don't think on like whether this continent tweets or this continent tweets. So underlying, like you probably would have decided on some partition key where your tweets are stored. So if you have chosen user ID, then depending on the user, it would have fallen in one partition. And that partition can be in one of the continents. Initially, like if the user was on, like if you have that, if you want to add your user ID or tweet ID into, depending on which you choose for a partition key, and along with that, do you also want to add your location to make sure that if I'm in United States and if I'm adding some content, I pick along with the partitioning based on my user ID, do you also want to add location to make sure that I pick a server only in United States? But like it can so happen that like the same tweets that are there in United States server, I mean like if it were stored in somewhere in US regions, so the people accessing in other continents, so when you choose the replication, like I have the primary in US regions, I can also have replicas in US regions along with replicas also available in other continents, so that like anybody who is accessing the tweets or any data from the other regions, they can access the nearby servers. So yeah, I think if you start going to details, like how you partition the data, and each partition will have replicas, and to ensure durability, you don't normally have the data not just in your region but also in some other region. So, and if you notice that there is some region where you don't have the data stored, but there are large number of users accessing your content, then you can have a monitoring established and probably decide, let's have one more replica there to increase the to decrease the latency. I don't know if that answered.
Okay, you are saying if some people from Asia region trying to follow from US, those kind of requests will be fulfilled from that data center kind of thing. Is that right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. And if any video content, is it mandatory to discuss about that CDN thing? If the design is linked with the videos, images, then?
Yeah, basically CDNs is basically anywhere you want to, mostly if you see any the kind of content that's in CDN is like if mostly the images or the newspapers, if you see most of the content is static, and whatever that you have in CDNs, and it doesn't change dynamically. So if it's static and doesn't change and you want to access as quickly as possible, then most easiest answer is CDN. So it's close to the user, and it can be immediately served. So it's like even static websites can be directly cached in CDNs, and it's like available as soon as you hit it. So
and somebody once asked me, have you worked or know any CDN? I honestly told, hey, this is not something my domain, and I've never worked on CDNs, but I know.
Yeah, this can.
So I can give you just an idea or my understanding on CDN, but it is not something I've hosted in the past.
Okay, because my problem is even I didn't get chance to work in NoSQL also. So in that kind of situation, based on my learning only, I have to manage and talk about that.
Yeah, you can say that like this NoSQL databases can be used, like for example, DynamoDB in Amazon, or like which can act as document or NoSQL depending on the or like key value. And there could be like other databases which MongoDB only document oriented. So depending on like what's your scenario, you can say like Cassandra is again yeah, key value mainly, so and columnar.
I have one question. Can I ask?
Yes, Chen.
Yeah, so as Vivek sir mentioned, as it was a very famous question, and Aseem was doing it really well, so he sort of was taking the charge. So when you encounter this question, can we just pretend that we don't know this question beforehand, and we're just thinking then and there, then struggling a little bit at the beginning, then finding the way towards the end? Is it recommended so that the interview won't increase the difficulty or to tweak the question?
I can answer this question. Please don't do that. Please don't do that ever. Because the problem with this is that if you fake a struggle, as an interviewer, I know where you should struggle and where you shouldn't be struggling. And I can almost guarantee that you will struggle in the wrong place if you're trying to fake it. And you will get through the harder parts quickly, and then you'll struggle at the easier parts, and that will go negatively for you. So in general, there is nothing wrong as an interviewer. If I look at this and Aseem's like, walking through the whole thing quickly, I know that this is the right thing. He has seen this question before, and even if he has not seen this question, like he has thought about it. Like, maybe who knows? Aseem wanted to launch a Twitter competitor at some point of time. He thought about this at different ways and decided not to, have a startup or something like that. So I don't think it makes sense for you to fake your struggles. I mean, you will struggle for real anyways. So please don't fake your struggle.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
So I had a few quick things to just catch up, and I want to just do that. So number one is on the chat, if folks have not been following, NG has been posting some really great material around how data is stored, GDPR, and other pieces. So please read that. It's very useful and very good. Thank you for doing that, NG. And just wish you speak up because the recording, unfortunately, won't capture that. So it's going to be a little, maybe Dippy, you can copy that and see if you can incorporate that in the notes that you have.
Sure.
Right?
I think when we have this Zoom recording, we can even download the transcript.
We can, but the YouTube version doesn't generally have it. It's a little more effort on our part to incorporate that somehow in the video. So we generally just download the video and upload it. We don't download the chat, but we have a copy of the chat. That's fine, but it won't be available in the recording.
So what I'm suggesting, when we post the link of the video, just also upload the chat in the Discord.
Yeah, we could possibly do that. So I would let I think Naga and Aseem and Dippy figure out how to deal with this. That was one. Second thing that I wanted to cover was two parts of this one. So I think generally for system design, I expect the system design in 4 parts, right? The first one is essentially requirements clarification or problem exploration, which I think Aseem and Naga did a good job, like Aseem did a good job of in that one, where you walk through the question, explore, like, tell me more about the use case, how many businesses, how many customers, and all that stuff. So that's actually good. The second part of it is the high-level design or block diagrams. And I think that also happened very well. And then the third part of it is low-level design, where you're picking tool choices, technology choices, and whatnot, and you keep layering this in multiple ways. And then the fourth point is the system verification aspect of it. And I think this was the weakest link of all the 4. Because Naga had to ask you essentially what are the hotspots in the system and what will happen and things like that. So I think if you, in your mind, divide and compartmentalize the interviews into 4 chunks, the first one is essentially requirement gathering. At that point of time, don't think about anything, just think about requirements. Let's not talk about hotspots yet. Let's not talk about low-level design and whatnot, just requirements, functional, non-functional, and whatnot. Second phase is the high-level block diagram. The advantage of drawing the block diagram is the interviewer gets a chance to say, let's focus on just this aspect of the design, not the other aspect. So that happened. The low-level design was very well done. And then the last step is system verification. Once you think you're done, you should go for the verification. So that's the general structure. The thing that I wanted to double click and highlight was that even when Naga pointed out, like, here, what are the hotspots? You talked about the hotspots, but I don't think you talked about the mitigations enough. I may have to go back and watch that particular thing. I didn't see you come across with that, like, for example, what are the single points of failure? And you accurately called out, like, this is a single point of failure, that is a single point of failure. And I think in one case you offered a mitigation, which was essentially saying that if the tweet data goes down, then I will show stale data to the customer, right? Which is like, maybe hour old or 2 hours old and something like that. That is important. So whenever we're talking about verification and failure patterns, you have to talk about what would be the mitigation. Like, what will be the implication in the sense that if my storage system or the ability to write goes down, which means that I'll have to somehow prevent the customer from uploading data, and I may have to show a sorry page or something else. It could be a catastrophic system failure where the behavior, nothing can work, or it could be like a soft system failure where you may have an alternative option and whatnot. I think you did that. It was not a bad performance. I think it was somewhere between okay and good. But the thing is that I think you did that in 1 or 2 cases, but you didn't do it in all the cases. Like, there were like 2 or 3 hotspots you discussed. You did not talk about the mitigations in all of them. And then as I was thinking about it, the next hotspot, you did come up with a mitigation. So I'm like, yeah, okay, it makes sense. So, I mean, you salvaged that part of it, but my feedback to anyone who's attempting interviews is that whenever we're talking about failure cases on hotspots, always think of what would be the customer impact of that hotspot and what would be your mitigation strategy for that, even if it's like very minimalistic. That's all I had.
Okay. So Vivek, the failure during the high-level system design, I can postpone and do that later, or during the design itself, I have to call it out?
Fantastic question. Fantastic point. System verification actually happens throughout the course of the interview. Even as a part of the requirement gathering, you will be verifying you'll be doing a spot check of different aspects of it. So system verification is a continuous process, but at the end of everything you're done, you'll go and do a comprehensive system verification. Think of this like if you're doing a programming interview, for example, where it's like a coding interview, this is the same thing as testing. So would you, like, I want you to test in the end for sure, but then I would appreciate it if you're like going through as you're asking for requirements clarification, whatnot, and even writing modules of code, I want you to kind of test, like saying, oh, the input for this will be this, the output will be this, and so on. Like as you testing as you go is a good quality. So do that, but you don't have to do a comprehensive testing in the beginning or in between. Just do the comprehensive testing at the end. So same thing here. It's very similar to that. So system verification, don't skip it. That is absolutely essential.
Okay, thanks.
So one question, Vivek. So how I could have been done better? Like myself itself jump, okay, I want to do some kind of verification, or like the interviewer asks, or if the interviewer is not asking, I can suggest myself, hey, I want to go from this component to this and see what could be like a single point of failures or bottlenecks.
Yeah, I think one of the things I would do is now that I'm done with the system design, now that I'm done with the low-level system design, I just like to do a quick check to identify what are the hotspots in my system. And I think I'll be bottlenecked by this. Like storage, I'm not worried about because it's infinitely scalable. This I'm not worried about because this is okay. This is one area where I think there could be a concern. Like if something happens, or if this is my hottest spot seems to be this one, and that's probably where I'll just make sure that either I have a mitigation. Like it's not required for me to start big at this point. Like I wouldn't add a load balancer today, for example. But if my service becomes incredibly popular, then that I see as a concern because I only have one entry point into my system. So I'll introduce a load balancer or something like that. So I think the point I would do is once I'm done with like, just like how you do in a coding interview, you finish your coding interview, and then before you say, I am done, you say, let me just quickly test this with the inputs that were given to me, right? In the same way, you would just say, before we do this, let's kind of make sure that this thing covers everything that we asked for. There are cases where you will actually forget. For example, if Naga had given a requirement of video storage or something like that, you may have designed the video storage system separately. You may have designed the tweet storage separately, but you may have forgotten to store the URL of the storage as a part of the tweet metadata in the part of your design. So just making sure that everything has been accounted for and all the requirements have been handled is required. And as you go through that verification exercise, you can start calling out the hotspots that you see if you want to. That's the only thing that I would have to that I'd add. I think the essence of this is more around doing it yourself, which is one thing, like, without being prompted. And the second part of it is offering mitigations of whenever you identify a hotspot. So those are the two lessons I want people to take away from this. Does that answer your question, Aseem?
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. But good discussion. I know we're almost at time. I'd let you guys handle other questions as well. I'm gonna go on mute.
I would then stop the recording and then can take other offline questions.